Good morning. My name is Rebecca Bruner, and I am with Brad Kinney this morning, and we're going to be talking about Ed, his father. Ed Kinney was very involved in Pleasanton and at the museum. He was on the board at the museum for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know how many years.
He had to have been on the board for at least 8 years
or longer.
Or longer.
And he brought me on the board and many people.
That was one
very
of his
good.
biggest accomplishment was bringing you on the board.
Thank you, Brad. Anyway, so we're
Schmoozer, right?
Yeah. It's January 31st, 2025. And this evening we have our big one in Valentine, and Brad Kinney is such a great auctioneer, and we're so thrilled to have him, and he does the DJ things as well, but because so many people in the audience know you,
Yeah.
and you know them, and you know how to get them to
Yeah. It makes it easy on
empty
me.
their pocketbooks.
Because I know who can afford it. I know who's
Yes.
like committed to Pleasanton. I'll get some money out of them tonight.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, because the museum, we're always looking for help. It's difficult,
Yeah,
nonprofits.
sure.
Yeah. So is that why you got into helping so much the community, because of your dad?
You know, that's never been asked to me, but I would probably say yes. My dad had such a love for community, had such a love for this city, and just seeing how many people he was able to reach and just connect with. I always kind of admired that about him. So it's probably, internally, that's one of the reasons why I love to be able to give back.
Yeah. Well, and your personality is very much like your dad's.
Yeah, and I think that is a high compliment. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, because everybody loved Ed.
Yeah.
He was the Irishman. I mean, he would say, "Oh, Brad, you look fantastic this morning, and you make my day to see you." And the next person would walk in, he'd say the same thing to them, and it was like, what?
It's interesting because he was actually genuine when he would say that.
Oh,
Some people say that they're fake,
Yeah.
but I just know that every time my dad, he would always look you in the eye, and he would always be very genuine and when he greeted people. And it used to drive my mom nuts because they would go to the store, and my mom tends to be a little bit shy, and my dad wanted to talk to everybody. And so there was this conflict to where, oh no, we have to go grocery shopping again with Ed, but he'll know everybody. So
I'll meet you in the car, Ed.
Yeah.
But he loved to talk to people. He was very much a people person.
Yeah.
But he gave so much back. But you had to be a big support for him. I mean, for him to do that.
Well, yeah.
Kind of behind the scenes support.
Yeah.
And I liked being with them because I could kind of just tag along and, say whatever I wanted to say, and then he carried the ball.
So Roberta Kinney is with us this morning as well. And Roberta, yes, was the backbone behind Ed.
100%.
Yes, I mean, always supported him in whatever he did. But even the crazy stuff, I don't know. But so where did Ed come from?
He grew up in Pasadena. Family lived in Pasadena for many years. His father, Sierra Madre, close enough. I grew up in Pasadena, Sierra Madre area.
Okay.
His dad, my grandpa, was mayor of the town of Sierra Madre. So that's, I think, where he got his drive for civic duty.
Okay.
I remember always seeing a plaque of my grandpa and said, William Kinney, mayor, and I always thought that was pretty cool on his fireplace. But that's where they grew up, and I don't know how many years. I don't know how old he was when he moved. Do you know how long he was or how old he was when he moved?
I think a sophomore.
Sophomore in high school. Moved. His father, my grandfather, got transferred to San Leandro, and they ended up buying a house in Walnut Creek.
What did Grandpa do?
That's a good question.
Flint coat.
Flint coat, whatever that is.
Okay.
Paper, wasn't it? Paper manufacturer?
I think it was.
Yeah,
Okay.
paper manufacturer. So paper
Okay.
manufacturer, and then mayor.
Okay.
But it's interesting when he came to Walnut Creek, they were just building Las Lomas High School,
Okay.
and so his senior year, he was class president, and so because he was class president, he graduated first. And then he helped pass out the diplomas.
Oh.
So he always had, his big claim to fame was he was the very first person ever to graduate from Las Lomas High School. And he would be not shy to tell you that.
Yes. He liked those.
He
those
liked
things.
to talk about that.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah. So, was his family? They're Irish.
They're Irish, and they were a big family.
Okay.
Seven brothers and sisters.
Okay.
Big Catholic family. Which was interesting because when he met my mom came from Presbyterian background.
Oh.
And so back then, if you were Catholic, you could not go into another church.
Right.
And so when my parents married, my mom said, "Hey, I'll marry you, but you need to be Presbyterian." And so they got married in the Presbyterian church, and my grandparents couldn't attend the service, which is kind of sad.
Also,
It is sad.
his father was Catholic. His mother was Methodist.
Oh.
She never changed.
Oh yeah, that's right.
She signed the papers saying that
She would raise the children Catholic.
Yeah.
But she never changed.
Yeah. They had those rules in those times, and other churches, not just the Catholic Church, had rules sometimes about going to other
Sure.
churches too. But yeah.
And the only one that could come to our wedding was Gammy, his mom.
His mom, yeah.
Because
She was a
the
Methodist.
priest said, no, you can't go into another church.
How sad is that, right?
That's really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always questioned that as growing up, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm glad those rules have changed because that really isn't. It separates families.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm sure his parents would have loved to have celebrated
Yes.
the
Yeah.
two of you. Yeah.
And my dad was a Mason.
Oh.
So there was, we almost didn't get married because of
Just because of
religion,
religion. Oh.
which is too bad.
Yeah, which would have been, you wouldn't be here then today.
Yeah.
Right?
how sad would that be?
You'd be Steve or somebody. That would be sad. So there were some other things that he claimed to fame. Did he go to college after
He
that?
went to Cal
Okay.
for how many years? Went to Cal for?
3, and
3
then
years.
he went down grade points, and so
He went to San Francisco State.
He dropped out and went to work for Union Oil for a time. And
Okay.
he went to Yosemite and met me.
Yosemite.
Yes, we were both working in Yosemite. He
Oh.
worked for the Awani Hotel.
Okay, was this a summer job or?
Yes, summer job.
Oh.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, you think about it. If he quit Cal because of his GPA went down.
Yeah.
If he hadn't have quit Cal, he would not have gone to Yosemite. He wouldn't have met my mom, and none of this would be here.
Again, you wouldn't be
I
here.
would be here again.
Yeah.
All of these
But
facts.
then we got married after, let me see, we met in April and we were married in November. And we didn't have.
That was a quick decision.
We didn't have
Yeah.
Scott until 2 years later, because I didn't want anybody to think, oh, she went to Yosemite and got pregnant.
Yeah.
But where did you grow up then?
Concord, I went to
Okay.
Mount Diablo,
Okay.
yeah. Ed graduated from San Francisco State.
Okay.
After we were married, he went back to school. I worked at the phone company
Okay.
as a service rep.
And what was his degree in?
Communication.
Of course. Go figure.
Which he probably got an A+ because he was a talker.
Yeah, right.
So what made you go to Yosemite to work in the summer? Just
We used to always, my family used to camp in
Okay.
Yosemite. And I was always allowed to take a friend. So I took Pat DeLambert, one of my best friends. She dated a guy whose father was a forest ranger. And he said, you should, get a job in Yosemite. So he actually drove down and picked us up, took us to Yosemite, introduced us, to the personnel manager, and we got jobs in the old village store.
Oh,
Yeah, that was the first year. The second year, I met him the second year. The second year, I worked in reservations for Yosemite Park and Curry Company.
and Ed worked at
The
the Awani
Hotel.
doing,
He started as a pot washer, and then he got promoted.
Worked his way up to
Yeah.
being a waiter.
Yeah,
oh,
and there's a story where it was a big convention at the Awani, and he was waiting tables, and he had this big tray with all these entrees with the covers,
yes.
and he went to put it down, and they all slid off onto the stone floor, and all of a sudden somebody started clapping, and the whole place clapped. So he bowed and got everything and went back to the kitchen.
Mom, this would be a way better interview if you just sit next to me. Come on.
Roberta, this is just for your
Seriously,
family.
you're doing great. Come on.
Oh,
Come on,
no,
sit next-
I'm very comfortable.
Mom. She's so shy.
Oh,
All right.
okay, but that's great. I didn't know you met at Yosemite. So,
And you know what he called it? Our Yosemite.
oh, oh, that's sweet. So, where did you both live then when you first got married?
Okay, we lived on Euclid Avenue in a little house behind my mom and dad's house.
Okay.
When they bought the property, they built a prefabricated house. And then they, while they lived there, I think I was in kindergarten, and then they built the house in front on Euclid Avenue in Concord.
Okay.
And so when we got married, we lived there for, I think, a year and a half, and then we moved to Walnut Creek.
And how did you get to Pleasanton?
Okay, we bought a house in San Ramon Village. And Ed was a pharmaceutical salesman for Letter Lake Laboratories.
A drug pusher.
Yeah,
Yes.
drug pusher. Yeah.
That's what we always tease you. Yeah.
And he called on Dr. Shanks in Pleasanton.
Okay.
And he came home and he said, I found the town that I want to raise my family in. So he took me for a ride to Pleasanton, and we went down St. Mary's, and I fell in love
Of course,
with all
yeah.
the little houses. And so that
The
was
rest is history,
beginning.
right?
Yeah, so they were building, these houses, Morrison Homes. And so we bought this in 1967. Should I tell you how much?
Yes, if you would.
$24,000.
$24,000.
Oh my God, that was a bad investment.
Yeah.
24,000, and now they're worth
Yeah. A million eight.
$1,000,008. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
right.
mean,
Right.
yeah,
We were lucky.
yes. And 24,000 though was a lot of money at that time.
Yes.
That was a big
yes.
commitment.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
And, well, Scott was the first class of Walnut Grove. And then,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Interesting.
So it almost beats Ed.
Yeah, see?
Almost. He wasn't the first one to graduate, but the first class.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Oh,
And Brad, would walk to school, and, we had no fear.
Yeah.
The kids would just go out and play all day and come home for dinner.
so what year did you move here? 1960?
67?
Okay, and that's, when really the building boom came to Pleasanton, right? I mean, this whole area kind
Yeah.
of started building out.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, from what I understand, it was a lot of younger couples like yourselves
Yes.
with children or starting families,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so that was kind of a nice way to get introduced to everyone in the community because you
Yes.
all kind of pulled together. You were all kind of in the same boat, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about it as a kid, just growing up on this block alone, there were just so many kids our own age. And so everybody would be out on the street until, 9 o'clock at night, just, doing what we're doing, throwing rocks or whatever it may be. But it just, this whole development was just full of young families with young kids, and that's what made it really nice to grow up.
Yeah.
You and Johnny Viber.
Yeah.
throwing rocks over the fence and
Oh.
breaking a window.
Well, and Ken Mercer.
And Marcia lived right across the street.
Oh, okay.
On
Yeah.
the corner, yeah.
Okay. And he and Ed did a lot of civic
They
things
did
together.
a lot of civic
Yeah.
things together, yeah.
Well, I think it was Brad Hurst and Ken Mercer, Ken Whitaker,
Yeah, the good old boy generation.
yeah, and they convinced Ed to run for city council.
Okay. And why do you think they did that?
Well, because Ed he seemed to be popular with everybody,
Okay.
and
Also, remember, it was like it's a good old boy generation back then.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like they wanted to keep their buddies in, in the civic duty or in council.
Yeah.
And so I think they did a lot of rotation, like, hey, why don't you do it for the next year, or why don't you run for the next 4 years, and just to kind of
Because we all kind of were like-minded.
Yeah, yeah. And so you had all these guys, Brad Hurst and Ken Whitaker and, that whole group, Ken Mercer, and they all kind of had the same idea of Pleasanton. They all
Okay.
loved Pleasanton. They all were pouring into Pleasanton. They were keeping their families here. And they just kind of wanted to sort of keep it in this tight group.
Okay.
And back then it worked really well. Because
Yes.
it wasn't as political as it is, say, now.
Yeah.
Back then it was just almost having fun at these city council meetings.
Yeah, and they did have fun.
They had a lot of fun.
And after meetings, didn't they go to the Pleasanton Hotel a lot?
No, they sipped on Diet Coke and they.
actually, Ed really didn't go to the Pleasanton Hotel.
I think a lot of them did though.
George Spiliotopoulos.
Yeah, George Spiliotopoulos.
Yeah.
But
But that was really the hangout in town.
100%,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Even though there were a lot of bars downtown, wasn't the
It was
Pleasanton
always
Hotel?
Pleasant Hotel.
Yeah.
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Was kind of a mainstay, and that's where you went for
Yeah.
graduations
Yep.
and Mother's Day and things like that.
Yeah,
right?
and that's why it's kind of special that his name is on the building. Of
Yes.
all buildings where he used to announce the parades and all that, to have his name there, it's just.
So
means a
how
lot.
come his name is there? Tell us the
So going back to 1972,
What?
Good Times Parade.
Um,
We have
what year?
early 1970. She's looking at the exact date.
74.
1974. My dad used to listen to KMBR. And it was Frank Dale and Mike Clary on the air, and they said, "Hey, we're going to have a contest. We're going to host a parade." The two of them had a bet. Mike Clary and Frank Dale had a bet on, and whoever lost the bet had to actually host a parade somewhere in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And so one of them lost. Whoever it was looking for a place to host this parade. And so my dad reached out and said, "Hey, Pleasanton is the perfect place to host this parade." And so they ended up, they met and walked downtown Pleasanton, and my dad showed them around, and they decided that Pleasanton was the spot to host the Good Times Parade. And, having no idea it was going to be as big as it actually was.
Because it got to be pretty.
It's huge. And so it's what started out to be kind of a joke, ended up being really kind of a mainstream Pleasanton. And so, here it is.
Sorry.
Yes. And your dad was, I'm just going to show this to the camera.
Yeah, that's Mike Clary and Frank Dill with my dad, and that's when they
In
were
the middle.
walking
In the
downtown
middle,
Pleasanton
yeah.
when they decided to bring the parade to Pleasanton.
And so how many years did it go on?
I think they just did it.
Couple of years, and then the city sort of took it over and started.
Okay.
They turned it into the downtown holiday parade.
Okay.
But I think they did that one for 2 or 3 years.
Okay. Because I've heard so much that people loved it.
What was interesting is you had because it was a Bay Area thing, you had people that were signing up to be part of the parade from San Francisco and all over the Bay Area. And so it kind of made it fun. It wasn't just a Pleasanton event. It was an entire Bay Area from San Francisco all the way, to, say, Modesto. People taking part of it. And that's what kind of made it so big.
Yeah.
And it just kind of morphed into this incredible parade. And so my dad, since he was the one that brought it in, volunteered to announce it from the Pleasanton Hotel. And so that's kind of, so he announced it. It was on the air at KMBR and just spread like wildfire.
So the balcony on the Pleasanton Hotel
Yeah.
is named after your dad.
Yeah.
And was that the city who named it?
Going back to that good old boy generation,
Yeah.
it was a combination of Brad Hurst and the Macchianos and that whole
Push
group.
for that.
Yeah, Frank Capella. They said, we should do something, whether it's a street sign or something. And so they kind of all got together and said the Pleasant Hotel, that balcony was special for my dad. Let's dedicate that to my dad.
Yeah.
Joni Fields.
Oh, and Joni Fields, of
And
course.
that was after Ed passed.
Yeah.
But that, yeah.
Actually, they dedicated it the week before he passed. And so when they had the dedication, he was in hospice.
Yes.
But he was still very coherent. And I went to the dedication and they were able to take pictures, and I was able to bring them back and show my dad what the city had done. So that was really special to be able to have that moment with him, to be able to share the fact that they are naming it as Ed Kinney Balcony.
Do you remember anything he said?
Oh, big smile. And it just, that was, that was so special for him. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we've named our lecture series or speaker series at the museum, because Ed kind of started that.
Yeah.
And I worked with him, and we started doing lectures in the museum, and then it got too many people.
Yeah.
So then we went to the Methodist Church, and then we ended up at the firehouse. But now we do a Chautauqua kind of program, which is wonderful. Are you going this year, Roberta?
No.
We have Lucille Ball coming.
Oh,
I
wow.
know. I saw it. I guess it's hard to get tickets.
I will get
I
was going to say.
will get you tickets, Roberta.
When is it?
I'm a member, but
When
Yeah.
it we have 9 shows during the year.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
But we have Lucille Ball, we've got Calamity Jane, we have General Patton is the first one, we've got Edgar Allan Poe. But these are professional performers who act as if they are the character.
Maybe I'll come over here and take her.
Yeah,
So we'll come
That
together.
would be great, and it would be great because it's named after Ed.
Yeah.
And yes.
We're gonna do that.
Okay.
I'm gonna pick you up, and we're gonna.
All right, we'll talk about tickets after.
And then you can buy lunch or dinner.
Okay.
Okay. And then also we have the Patriot Awards
Oh yeah.
that are named after Ed. Now, that was Ron Sutton and Jerry Long started that program. And Ron knew, they probably both knew Ed.
Yeah. So my dad would host and MC the 4th of July parade.
Yeah.
4th of July, not parade, but it was more of a picnic barbecue.
Yes, that Ron had started.
That Ron had started, and so they kind of worked together on that. And so when my dad passed away, Ron called and said, "Hey, I'd really like, if it's okay with your family, I would love to be able to do some kind of a Patriot Award in honor of your dad." And of course, we're like, "Of course." What's so special about that award for us, for our family, is the fact that it just kind of keeps my dad, a lot. He'll always be, obviously in our hearts, but it just kind of reminds us that he's, what the impact he made in Pleasanton. And it's so nice to be able to once a year get together with all these old time Pleasanton people, and celebrate the accomplishments of those that are still in Pleasanton,
Yes.
but still have the Ed Kinney name.
Yes.
And it still brings it back to that, he hasn't been forgotten.
No.
And he made that impact. And so I just remember the first year that we had that, it was actually on the exact date that he passed away. And so it was a very special moment for our family to be able to, obviously been mourned, but now it's time to celebrate.
Yeah.
And so now coming back to Pleasanton every year for that event is more of a celebration.
Yeah. And those people, it's not what they did in their jobs, it's what they do outside of their jobs.
For the community, yeah.
For the community. And it is such an honor. I was honored one year.
Yeah.
I'm one of the patriots, yeah. But it's just, I love working with that committee, and I love being, because Ed was very, very special.
Yeah, yeah.
He was a real love. I really loved Ed, but yeah, and it's such a nice thing because it does keep your dad's memory out there too, and everybody, so many of the people that come knew him and still love to talk about him.
Yeah, but it's nice because you have the old
We're
school,
getting new, yeah.
and then you have these new people. There's a lot of the people that win the award that have never even heard of Ed Kinney.
Right.
And so that's nice because you're introducing and you're keeping this old time Pleasanton legacy, not only just of my dad, but just of the culture back then, keeping it alive through today's date and time.
Yes.
Which is nice.
And the civic mindedness of your father, and so his philosophy going forward.
And not as and even to go deeper than the civic minded, it's more about the attitude of you could be civic minded but not have the right heart, right? You know what I mean? It's like having the right heart. Like, why are you doing the civic minded just because it's a job, or because you want attention, or you want to you want to be part of groups, or are you doing it because you truly love this community and the people of the community? And that's, I think, where the award kind of comes from.
Yes.
It's the people that are deeply involved for the right reasons and understand the impact that they make by what they're doing in the city.
Yeah.
Oh, and there was another thing. He was one of the first soccer coaches.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
I did not know that.
I forgot. Yeah.
Somebody came and asked him to be a soccer coach.
Yes.
And he said, well, I don't know anything about the game. And he said, well, here's a book.
Yeah.
Read it. So he coached both of the boys.
And that was Harry Miller.
Yeah.
And
Baldrini.
Larry Baldrini. These guys. And look at how big, Pleasanton, Ballistic United has.
Oh, yes.
I mean, that's where Ballistic United started, was that year.
Yeah. Soccer's huge here in town.
Yeah.
So Ed was a pharmaceutical salesman for quite a while. Then when did he leave that, and why did he leave that? Because I knew him as a realtor, of course, later.
Yes.
I'll tell it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember he just got burned out from being a pharmaceutical salesman. He was here in Pleasanton, and he just kind of felt like he wasn't contributing anything, and he loved Pleasanton so much. He wanted to do something, and my mom's going to laugh because he thought, what I want to do is I want to open up a donut shop downtown Pleasanton.
I could see him doing that.
So that was he was like,
Roberta at the counter.
I found my calling. And my mom was like, "Are you crazy?" And he goes, "No, that would he goes, I'll be a Pleasanton owner. I'll get a gathering spot." And until he said, "Well, I'm going to walk down," but he had to be there at 4:00 in the morning. So he walked down.
I suggested that. Well, go and see.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Ted Mavrides.
Ted Mavrides,
Yes.
yep. So Ted was the owner.
Okay.
So my mom said, well, if you really want to do that, you should probably experiment with it first. So go and see what a normal day would be like. And after the first day, he come back and say, nope. So I think that spawned us, like, he started thinking about, well, what else can I do to actually serve in Pleasanton? And I think that's how real estate came about. And I remember as a kid, there was some tension between my mom and my dad, because it's like real estate is, it's not a
check every month.
It's not a check every month. And so, and my mom was used to, a check every month, retirement plan. And
we had been married 25 years. And that's when I found out that he wanted to go into real estate. And I thought after 25 years, we would be set.
Yeah.
We'd be able to travel and everything. And then
start all over again.
Go into real estate.
Yeah. But I remember, there was a little bit of friction, but I remember my dad saying, I truly love Pleasanton. What was interesting about my dad, there's a lot of realtors in the world, and I'm not tooting, his horn, but he was never about what the paycheck was.
Yeah.
He was, I just want, I believe in this town so much that I believe that your family needs to be in Pleasanton. And, he would cut deals. He would do whatever it took to get this family to Pleasanton because he loved Pleasanton so much. And I can't tell you how many times, whether it was a kid or an adult, just driving through Pleasanton and driving downtown Main Street, and he would just get tears in his eyes out of the blue, and he would just stop and say, I just love this town. And that's what, and I always thought that was really cool of him. Coming from a young boy and seeing this example of doing something that you love to do for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And I think that over time, that's where I got some of that, because he showed me by example,
Yeah.
to do what you love.
Yeah.
And then you get paid for it as a bonus.
Yeah. And you will get paid
Yeah.
because you do. And yeah, it was about the service to people.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the paycheck.
Yeah.
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 And that's why people love to work with him.
Yeah.
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 And he brought that to anything that he, when he joined the museum, I mean, he really put his all into it. He
Yeah.
did whatever he joined, he put his all into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that he really wanted to do that he never accomplished was he really had a heart's desire to be on the board of the Alameda County Fair.
Oh.
I know that that was he just had a mission, because that's even a bigger example
Yeah.
of what his
Why do you think he wanted to be on the board at the fairgrounds?
because he just loved the fair.
And he loved.
He had a heart for Pleasanton, and he had a heart for the Pleasanton Fair.
Well, he told me one time when we were working together at Hometown that he was going to have his funeral at the fairgrounds.
Yeah.
And I said, who do you think you are? That you can have your, I'm going to have it, and I'm going to have,
So that's interesting. That was-
popcorn and
When did he say that? Like years before?
Yes.
Wow, that's crazy.
Well, and that's why I know I've told you, but I put on a fake funeral for him.
Yeah, yeah.
That, as
yeah.
kind of a skit. And I did it because he was saying, this is when we were just talking about his life. And he said he'd gone to some Catholic school and as a kid and that he was going to have his. So I thought, I'm going to get this guy. And we did
Yeah.
the fake funeral.
Yeah.
We had all sorts of political people come.
That's so
and Hillary Clinton came.
Yeah.
Willie Brown got a pie in the face because he'd gotten that in San Francisco
Yeah.
around that time. But yeah,
Wow.
he'd said that I'm going to have. And I'd never heard of anyone having their funeral at this. So I
Yeah.
said, who do you think you are?
Did you know that he said that?
At first, not well.
Yeah.
I knew that you had the skit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but did you know that he talked about that years before?
No.
Wow, that's
no.
Yeah.
interesting.
He always, yeah.
Yeah, but
Huh.
when he was at Brun's house,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
last part of his life, and he knew that he was dying, he, first of all, he said that he wanted to have a parade. Well, I said, I'm not planning a parade. I mean, that's not my thing. So then he switched and he said, go home and there's a little black book
Yeah.
with addresses and bring it to me.
And
And
is it
he called the fairgrounds.
he
And
while he was in bed, dying.
He
but
called and
Rick Pickering, who was the CEO of the fair then, he called and said, "Hey, I really want to have my funeral at there."
Yeah.
And so Rick was like, "Yeah, of course." And then he just kept on going down the list, and I want to have corn dogs.
corn dogs. I have a
wanna
corn dog
popcorn.
every year at the fair for Ed.
I
Yep.
do.
Yeah. And so, and that's kind of where our family is. We celebrate. We celebrate because we know where we're going. We know that death isn't just
Yeah.
an end. We know that death is just the beginning, and so we know the Bible is very clear that we will see our loved ones in heaven one day. And so we looked at it as, hey, we don't want to mourn because that's not the way none of us are as a family, and we knew for sure my dad wouldn't want us to mourn. And so we just looked at this as only my dad would want to have corn dogs and popcorn
And popcorn.
yeah,
And
and
the
the balloon
platoon.
platoon.
Blue, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was very
Because he was
special.
part of the balloon.
He was part of the original crew.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was interesting because now I'm able to MC the parades where my dad used to, and so every time the balloon platoon comes by, you know, where this new generation of Pleasanton, they don't understand. They just see a bunch of, you know, sailors and these, you know, these tubes, and they don't understand that it kind of started more as kind of a joke,
Yeah.
and that it really led into this band that's been all over the world,
Yeah.
performing at different parades.
Now, did your dad get to go
I
anywhere?
don't think he never.
I went to San Francisco when they had
Okay.
the Chinese New Year,
Oh, okay.
but he didn't travel because, you know, he was announcing the parade.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny to see, you know, because again, it started with my parents' little church group.
Church group.
Yeah,
Yeah.
church
Yeah,
group,
the
and
Mariners.
the Mariners church group,
Yeah.
and Dick Howard was the leader, and they were just kind of goofing around, and then it just became almost became really serious, right?
Yeah.
Dick worked for Goodyear. So
Oh, that's why the tires.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Joanne Howard
Yeah.
and Martha Mark and Ann Pruitt, they got these big sheets and sewed them together and, you know, made the costume. Yeah,
Yeah.
we were lucky to be in ship 4.
Yeah.
That is so, you know, the things that you start maybe as a joke or whatever, but you're right. Your dad always looked for the fun things.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I remember him saying to me when he was ill and dying, I don't know if I'll get to find out who won American Idol.
He said that to me too.
You know, and I said, and you know, you probably find out before any of the rest of us, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
That's probably another first on his list.
Yeah. What's interesting about that time, though, when he was at the Bruns house and he knew that he had, you know, X amount
Limited
of time left, and I remember people would come in to visit him, and they would come in very somber, and literally everybody who would would come back out of the room would come out with a big smile, and they would say the same thing. I thought I was going to encourage your dad, but in fact, your dad just encouraged me. And it's like, that's a great way to live life, right? It's
It
a
is
good way
a
to live
great way
life,
to
and it's a
live
great
life.
way to end life, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you know, that's,
Did he encourage you in your life?
yeah.
A lot of ways.
Yeah. Don't make me cry.
No,
No, he was the kind of guy that he didn't care. My brother was the big football star. My brother did everything right in his life. Literally, he was a straight A student, an unbelievable athlete. And I was a C student, and I was the one always getting in trouble, and I was the one.
that's part of the
Yeah.
the
It was interesting. I was thinking about tonight and how Joe Callahan is getting an award, and it's like what I remember about Joe Callahan is my dad was mayor when Joe Callahan was coming in and trying to propose bringing in the Hacienda Business Park.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, my dad coming back from city council meetings, all frustrated because they're trying to pitch bringing this Hacienda Business Park to Pleasanton, and half the town wanted it, and half the town was fighting tooth and nail. And so there was just friction going on, and my dad was kind of stuck in the middle. And my dad was saying, "Look, this bringing this business park to Pleasanton is only going to bring value to your homes. Home prices will go up. The city will be able to improve the streets. The infrastructure will be so much better." And it was just like
there might be jobs in the community
Yeah,
for
and
you
it
then.
just-
You might not have
half-
to travel
half
outside.
of the city just pounded him, and it was just and they ultimately got it passed. But it was a big struggle, and I remember as a kid how frustrated he would get. So it's kind of neat how many years later that Joe's getting an award tonight
to celebrate that
to
he did
celebrate
it. Yeah.
that. Yeah, so it's interesting how we're interviewing that to talk about that today.
Yeah. Well, and it was Pleasanton, as I understand it, was a small community.
Yeah.
And then, some builders came in and started building, but there's always people who don't want it to change any different. But it really brought in more jobs. It brought improvements to streets brought in some interchanges for the freeway. Yeah, and
There were
and
so
things
many
like
good
that.
things. I
Yeah.
mean, Pleasanton is still small. It's
Yeah.
still a small town.
Yeah.
But it's just, obviously there's infrastructure and there's businesses that came in and everybody's house value went up. And so all in all, I mean, obviously it was the best thing that happened in Pleasanton, but
Yeah.
it was a struggle.
And I bet it was hard for Ed to have people be against it. I mean, I bet that was hard for him.
Yeah, he's a people
Because
person.
he might take some of that personally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he would take
Did
it
he,
very.
Roberta?
I remember Kathy O'Brien, they were gonna cut some trees down along Hot Yard.
Yes.
And she came out to save the trees.
Okay.
And he went over, to talk to her. And he was a little bit apprehensive about it.
Yeah.
I can't remember whether the trees were saved or not.
Because
Yeah.
conflict was difficult
Yes.
for him.
yes.
He didn't, yeah. He liked if people,
But then
could come
there's
together.
always the same people that would show up to the
Of course.
city
Yeah,
council
they would
meetings.
complain and
Yeah.
yeah. It was never the people for. It was always the only people that would ever show up were the people that were against. And it was just like, come on, really?
yeah. They're the big bird.
Yeah.
girls.
And around that same time, it was interesting. My dad's biggest claim to fame, and where
I
I'm
think,
going with
yes.
this. And I have to say it because that's
Yeah, it's another
'cause
one.
Knowing him, that's the one thing that he would want to talk about. That he brought the very first stoplight to Pleasanton.
Yes.
And I remember as a kid, he goes, "Boys, get in there! I got to show you something incredible." And we were like, "Really?" And so we got in the car, we drove down Black Avenue, and he pulls over and he said, "Get out of the car." And we got out, and he said, "There it is. That's the first stoplight in Pleasanton." And we were like, "Really? That's exciting, Dad."
Yeah,
But I
wow.
mean, looking back on it, it's actually kind of a cool story
Oh,
because
yeah.
think of how big and all the technology now and how Pleasanton has changed. But to know that Pleasanton was without a stoplight for how many years?
So it was at Black and
Black and Santa Rita.
Santa Rita.
Yep.
And why there?
I don't know. Who knows? It was so
Yeah.
random, right? Was the post office even there yet? Probably not.
I think it was.
Probably because the Santa Rita was one of the main exits off of 580.
Yeah.
And before you start getting into downtown Pleasanton, there was that. There was
Maybe, yeah.
That's
There's
probably
an article in one of these scrapbooks about it.
that's
Oh.
funny. But I mean, I love stories like
But
that.
but then he took you guys to see it, and you guys are like,
we were like,
we've seen a stoplight before.
we need to go
yeah.
back and watch cartoons, Dad.
But yeah,
But just I know that was in the back of his mind,
Yes.
seeing how Pleasanton progressed over the years, to know that there was a time that there
Yeah.
was not a stoplight there. It's kind of cool.
yeah. I mean, and he certainly, that whole group of guys, it being a very important part of it, really saw Pleasanton grow.
Yeah,
With the new housing, with hacienda, with stoplights and all
Yeah,
of that.
yeah.
And yet the downtown stayed the same.
Say the same.
Pretty
absolutely,
much. Although there were more gas stations, I think,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But it really has, that they kept so many of the old buildings and they didn't destroy them like they do in so many communities.
Sure, yeah.
Because that really is a lot of the flavor of downtown,
And
right?
that's what makes it so special.
Yeah. So how long do you think Ed was on the council?
4 years, wasn't it? 4 years. Back then they had a term, so you could only be mayor for a year.
Oh, yeah.
I think that when Ken Mercer, so my dad, when he was going to step down, he convinced Ken to run for mayor.
Okay.
And I think at that point they changed the politics as far as then you could
Run for mayor.
run.
Because otherwise it was you,
Yeah.
they
They rotated
it on the
councilmen.
board,
So
yeah.
Phil Cox was mayor before my dad. My dad took it over, and then my dad talked to Ken Mercer because they were
Okay.
buddies. He lived across the street. So
Okay.
again, going back to the good old boy
Yeah.
generation, they just sort of, hey, why don't you become mayor this year and stuff?
Okay.
So they rotated.
Okay.
And then Jim Walker
Yes.
was city manager.
City manager.
And then who was it? Bill Edgar.
Oh yeah, Bill Edgar.
Bill Edgar, yeah, he was city manager. And when Ed went off of the city council, there was a party
Yep.
at the hotel.
Oh,
And his theme was, I did it my way.
Ed's
Yeah,
theme.
they,
Oh.
Brad put the slideshow together.
Oh.
And to the music, I did it my way.
Oh.
So, and you know, ironically, when Ed passed away,
Yeah.
I went to my doctor's appointment.
In Walnut Creek.
Well, no,
Oh.
here in Pleasanton, and you know, and I, you know, was just kind of looking out at the trees. You know, I was on the second floor, and there was music playing, and I Did It My Way came on, and it was like, you know,
Yeah.
he was talking to me.
Yeah.
I look for things like that.
And Ed would do those things if
Yes.
yeah. If
Well-
anyone could.
Well, after Ed passed away, you know, after, well, his aortic aneurysm,
Yeah.
he was in the hospital for 2 months. Then he came home, and then he had to go back because they discovered he had kidney cancer on top of that. And so I think Ed was concerned, you know, that he needed to tell me about things. So he told me how to change the light in the hallway.
Okay.
You know, he said, you know, bring it down, you know, and then, okay. So I knew how to do that. So after he passed away, that light went out. And so I talked to him the whole
Well,
time.
not only that light, but
Oh, yeah.
for probably at least 6 months, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Every time, you would walk in the kitchen, boom, boom, it would pop.
Yeah.
You'd walk in the family room, you turn it on, pop. I mean, how often you can go?
That doesn't happen.
It never happens. It happened all the time
Yeah.
for 6 months. It was almost to the point where it's like it's a joke. Like,
Didn't you go talk to Terry then?
I did. Did you? My brother probably did.
Okay.
Yeah. But
I talked to Jerry.
Okay.
But I mean,
and
so-
asked her to tell him to. It's okay. We know you're around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
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 See, and I believe in things like that.
I
Well-
do too. Well, our first tea was at Christmas time after he passed, and we'd never had electrical problems in the museum.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
all of our circuits
Oh,
we
yeah.
couldn't heat water.
That's pretty funny.
We had to go next door to Blue Agave and ask them if they'd give us
Yeah.
hot water because, and we blamed it. I blamed it at least on
Yes.
that.
Well, I'll tell you
Yeah.
something that I haven't shared. I've shared this with family, but this is my biggest testimony of really having life after death. When I was walking down the hall here, and we knew that at some point that this would happen, and I was walking down the hall, and I saw one of my daughters left a toy right here in this family room, and so I'm like, ah. So I went in there to go pick it up, and I felt something like this, like a breeze, and I was like, and it smelled. You know when you're going through, you know that smell in a hospice. It was that smell, and I was like, it stopped me in my track, and I was like, whoa, Dad was, and I don't know why I even said that. I'm like, Dad, was that you? And all of a sudden the phone rang, and it was Bren's house, and I said, Mom, you need to answer the phone, but it was.
He had just passed away.
I can't explain it any other way, but I felt a breeze and I smelled that same smell that I smelled.
We had gone to Bruns
Yeah,
that morning.
that morning.
And we made the comment.
Yeah,
What
but
is
it
that?
was-
You know, because he couldn't eat anything, or you know,
it was crazy.
you know, and I think they call it the death smell.
But
Yeah.
But what it did for me is, that phone call was something that I dreaded literally all my life.
Yes.
And it made that phone call palatable. It made that phone call, I remember, standing at the doorway in the bedroom where my mom was talking to Bren's house, and I remember going, it's okay. My dad just showed me something. God gave me a great gift.
That he came through
That-
the house
well,
as
that-
he was leaving, or
that there's a hope of
yeah.
this that we will see each other in heaven.
Yeah.
And that was just a gift to me that I feel that he gave me and that he gave me.
And that he watches over you.
Yeah.
So you said, I do the ghost walk, and that's whenever I have children in a group that I'm doing a walk, I always say to them, wouldn't you like to know if when your parents pass away or your grandma and grandpa, wouldn't you like to know that they're with you?
Yeah.
That they're still following you, watching over
Right.
you.
Yeah.
And it's very comforting.
Yeah.
And it seems like young children can communicate because they're more open.
Yeah.
Because I think after Ed passed away, Tiana was just, how old was Tiana? 4.
4.
And she was sitting on the toilet in the back bathroom, and I heard her talking, and I went in and I said, "Who are you talking to?" "Oh, Pa. I'm talking to Pa." And I just thought, well, that's so neat.
Yeah.
And they do say that children are much more open, and she may have even been seeing him and talking to him. Yeah.
And what's funny about knowing my dad, you'll appreciate this comment. So they lived in Pleasanton, and he always said, "Well, I can't ever afford Danville or Alamo. Just can't afford it. But Pleasanton is where I want to be." And he always said, "Well, I ended my life in Alamo. I made it all the way to Alamo because that's where the house was."
Well, he had the choice of either coming home or going to Brun's house, and he said he chose Brun's house because he knew that I'm not a nurse.
Yeah.
And it would have been a zoo because everybody would have wanted to come over.
Yeah.
And that would have been hard.
He knew that would be hard for you.
So I appreciated the fact that he went there.
Yeah.
And another thing I said, for the last, I said, if you want to send me a message, what bird do you want to be? And he said, a robin. So every time I see a robin, I think of Ed. And I told this to his sister, Jackie Howard, who is 96 now, and she lives in the Heritage. And she said, when I see a robin, I think, oh, has he come to get me?
No. And Ed had a brother who passed away before Ed.
Well, he had 2 brothers that died of aortic aneurysms.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So it was kind of a familial thing.
Well, yeah, and his father, they never investigated, but he supposedly had a heart attack, went to the hospital. He lived a couple of days, but they think that he died of aortic aneurysm. So
we've always we check every year.
Good.
All the cousins, everybody checks every year.
Yeah, because that's
Amen.
Yeah. Oh, but because I was at the Gay 90s with him, we were looking in the mirror there, and Terry said to him, it was just Ed and Terry and I. The other ones had gone in the basement, and said, "There's a man in the mirror, and he looks like you, Ed, but he's got a woman with him." And it was his
Bill
brother.
Kinney,
yeah.
his
Interesting.
brother.
Yeah.
And
because he was stationed at Parks.
Camp Parks.
Camp Parks.
Oh.
And apparently there were girls available.
Oh. Yes.
House of
Ladies who work the night shift.
Yeah.
And she saw Bill and a girl, coming out of the mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and doesn't Jerry Long doesn't she have a story about her husband had one of the offices upstairs?
Yes.
Was writing a book.
Yes.
And I think he had some
experiences with spirits at the
weren't they having
Pleasanton
an anniversary dinner in the hotel, and one of the glasses just exploded?
Jerry?
Jerry and her husband.
I'll have to. I've not heard that story, but I'll see her tonight and I'll ask her.
Yeah. I think if I could think of one thing about my dad is that he was always kind of a pseudo dad to all of my friends and my brother's friends. I mean, these are guys. Some of them didn't have dads; their parents had split up and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, our house was always kind of that safe house where everybody would come, and my dad would just hang out and tell jokes and be that the dad that these guys didn't have. And I just think that was a life lesson for me. Seeing that and seeing the impact that he made on some of my friends who still consider my dad as that guy.
That dad, yeah. And that's lovely. And for you as a kid, it really validated what a great guy your dad was if all these other kids really liked him.
Yeah. And he was the jokes. He would always. Yeah, I remember even my brother's class. They on football. The football team went all the way to NCS, the championship.
Wow.
And so all of these guys, their senior year, would all before a game, they would all count on my dad to give a joke before. So he would get all these big guys in their uniforms all around him, and my dad's in the middle, and he would tell a joke before every game
And it was
that
usually
year.
a dirty joke.
Yeah, it was usually a dirty joke.
And
Stan Larson's parents didn't like it very much.
But the boys,
They got him fired up, and they would count on my dad. They'd be like, "Come on, let's go!" Before they went out on the field, they would all gather around, and he would tell a joke, and then they would go off and get on the field. So, and I remember that because I was a freshman, but I remember how cool these guys were because they won every game all the way to NCS. So
NCS, the national,
it's basically
this area.
the
championship.
Coliseum and
Neat.
but lost to Pinole. I think
It was Pinole.
But it was just like in the movies, where we were kind of, we would all get in the line and in the car and follow. And we had the pom poms out the window.
Yeah.
It was a fun time.
So you had a house full of men.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up with 2 brothers.
Oh, and no sisters.
No sisters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so you were used to it. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So what do you think your dad would think of Pleasanton now?
Honestly, I think he would say it has gotten too political, and less about the city and more about the politics. That's what I would think. I think that unfortunately, like any city grows, and you lose that that small town feeling. He would still love Pleasanton. His favorite part of Pleasanton would be Main Street, of course, because it hasn't really changed that much. But I think from the politics, it's changed, right?
Yeah.
And there's been different leadership that has come in, which isn't bad. It's just different.
It's just different.
And more of the good old boys are no longer, kind of leading the pack, which is, which would discourage him, but yet he would still consider Pleasanton the best place in America. Okay. And he would still get teary. He would still drive downtown Pleasanton, and he would still get a tear in his eye. I think that he would be proud of Pleasanton for the growth. He would be proud of the growth and the development that has happened, and how the housing market has increased, and he'd be proud of that it has grown so much, and that back when there was that division. And that decisions to make on whether to continue the growth of Pleasanton or to keep it small, he would say, "Well done, well done to the leadership up to this point that has maintained that momentum in growth and keeping Pleasanton still somewhat safe and really this kind of a small town feel."
Yeah. Who did he admire a lot? Would you say?
Brad Hurst for sure. Brad Hurst, Frank Capella. You're talking about in Pleasanton?
Famous.
Yeah.
Oh, not famous people?
Yeah, probably
More
Pleasanton.
people, Pleasanton people, that he worked with. Frank Capella.
Bill, who was the city manager? I mean, he's got so many people that he talked about.
Bill Edgar.
The guy that is related to Hearst. Not Brad Hearst, but
Bill Apperson.
Bill Apperson.
He loved
Loved Bill Apperson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
those.
And the stories Bill could tell about,
Yeah,
Hearst Castle.
Hearst
Hearst
Castle.
Castle. I mean,
He got us tickets to Hearst.
Oh, Bill did? Oh.
Yeah.
and then there's always Macchiano and that group. He just loved. Rick Pickering he admired a lot because Rick was the CEO of the fair.
Right.
Bob Philcox. That whole group. I just know that he admired all those guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and I from a lot of the other people I've interviewed, the guys, they would say, we could decide some things and we just did them sometimes.
Yeah.
If Amador School needed some outside of the gym, I guess they needed some asphalt or whatever, and so
Right.
someone just went in and did it.
Yeah, and I think that's what
And they can't do that so much
Yeah.
anymore.
And that's what when I referred to when you ask about what he would,
Yeah.
when I talk about the politics,
Yeah.
he was used to just getting things done for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So if Amador needed something, or like you said, it was just these guys would make some quick decisions. Of course, we're going to do that. Let's get it passed. Let's not waste a lot of time. And now there's just a lot of red tape, a lot of politics that you have to go through to even get anything done, and sometimes it doesn't even get done. And so for my dad, it was more like, hey, this has to get done. They need this, and they need it now. So let's do what we need to do to get it passed.
Yeah. And so that would be one
Yeah.
frustration that he might
Yeah.
have today. Is there anything that you would think he would like to see that isn't here?
He would love to see the horse races back.
Yeah.
Well, they're still coming back during the summer, right?
No.
Not at all?
They just announced yesterday that there will be no horse racing this year in California.
Oh, how
Yeah,
sad.
so that's an area.
And I don't
that,
know if it'll come back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here comes
And it would be really sad if they do something different with that racetrack.
Right.
Just because it's such a
okay,
focal
all right.
point.
Yes.
And it goes back so many years
Yeah.
of Pleasanton, not only just Pleasanton, but Alameda County.
Right.
So I think that's one of the things that he would wish would come back or stay.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think he would be really pleased with just walking around Pleasanton and seeing how it is now.
He'd be Mr. Pleasanton downtown.
He would. Oh, he would. He would live downtown.
Yeah.
He would live
Yeah.
downtown.
He would live downtown.
I miss the good old days when we first moved here, because now, I don't know my neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know Will and Eva next door, but, the rest
Yeah.
are
It is-
Asian or Indian.
It is.
And they kind of keep to themselves, and I'm not one to go and introduce myself. Ed, I miss Ed.
He would have. Yeah.
He would have, known all the neighbors.
It is interesting though. So there was a day, as you know, you can go down Pleasanton and eat at Strizzy's or just walk downtown Pleasanton, and you would know most of the people.
Yeah.
And now, you again, I'm just speaking for myself.
Yeah.
I walk down and I don't recognize anybody. No one recognizes me, and it's just it's different because you always think of Pleasanton as a place where you'll know everybody.
Yeah.
And again, that's
Or at least run into people.
yeah, at least run into
And-
somebody,
yeah.
out of all those people. So that's an area that's a little bit sad, but yet it's okay because you remember, because downtown Pleasanton has remained kind of the same. So you remember, those times where you knew everybody.
Yeah.
So, and then growing up, I mean, it's interesting, my class at Amador, we all kind of, there's a group that still stays together, and we still communicate, and we still talk about it, and we all say the same thing. What a blessing it was to be able to grow up in Pleasanton when we grew up in Pleasanton. I mean, we all came from this, middle class family. Nobody was better, nobody was worse. It was just, and we all played together. And that was just the culture of Pleasanton growing up. And we still say that, like, what a blessing to be able to grow up in such a great town.
Yeah. And to grow up at a time when you could ride your bike all over town. You could do all these things, and and
Yeah, you could
you had to be home when the street lights
you
came
could
on.
go ice blocking at Castlewood Country Club.
We would go down to the creek,
Yeah.
you know, and I never worried about, you know, like
Yeah,
some
anything.
pervert,
Yeah.
you know. We just never heard of anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a good time to grow up, you know, here.
Well, and if kids got into trouble, you know, they learned from it, but, you know, they weren't thrown in jail or whatever. Like the time that Brad had his basketball team over to spend the night, and they decided, you know, that they would go out and have some fun. So they,
TPing or doing?
Well,
No, we were teeping, but then we took it one step further. We found a car that was open, and so we put it in neutral and we pushed it down the street on someone's lawn. And we thought that was fun, let's do it again. So we went to go do it again.
To another car.
To another car, and a cop car came around the corner and we all dispersed, and I made it home, and the other 4 guys got caught. And so they brought, the policeman brought the guys back to my house because they were spending the night.
Thank you, friends.
Yeah. I'm like,
yeah, and
So
I think Brad came into our bedroom and said, "Dad, trouble, police." And I covered my head.
I don't want to know.
yeah. But I mean, that's another thing about him is that, you know, it's not like he got, you know, he would get angry at times, but really he you know that he was laughing inside. And
He probably did some of those things
yeah,
himself.
and our big statement was always, "Hey, Mom and Dad, someday we're gonna laugh about this." And
Yeah.
so we always had that, you know, with my dad. We always knew that, hey, we would laugh about it someday.
And so the police came, and did you ever spend time at the museum?
No, no, I did not. Not like Eric Nostrand. No,
Yeah.
no, I.
Or Chuck Decker?
But it's
Yeah.
interesting, when my dad was mayor, one of the things Joe Rose
Yeah.
was, I think there was only 3 policemen at the time. And so my dad arranged for us to be able to take, you know, a night shift. And we thought that was so cool. And so, and the funny thing about it is we spent all night, my brother and I spent all night in the police car, just, you know, traveling until midnight. And there was absolutely nothing going on. The big excitement was at Lucky's, the parking lot. He whipped in, and there were some guys that were just there in a huddle, and they were stepping on crickets. And we're like, that's the big excitement in Pleasanton. And yeah.
No big murders,
No
bank
big murders,
robberies,
no, they were-
nothing,
the
anything.
guys, you know, the police, Joe Rose said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And they're like, "We're just stepping on crickets." We're like, "All right, have a nice day." But that shows you how much Pleasanton has changed.
Yeah.
Of course, it's still a safe city.
It is. And how the world has changed.
Yeah, the world's changed. Sure.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts or any final?
I would just say it's just such an honor that the city still kind of honors him and remembers him and you know, validates what he did and what he brought, and that to us as the Kinney family is so special for us, and we're so grateful that the city has continued on and the museum has continued on with those traditions.
Because I don't think anybody else has as many things named after them as Ed does.
Yeah.
Right? I can't think of anything.
Yeah. It's just so thank
it's
you.
Very wonderful man, a wonderful family.
Yeah, and the museum will always be near and dear because the museum was probably for my dad was the best part of Pleasanton.
Yeah.
And I remember how proud he was that he was on the board.
Yeah, he enjoyed Charles and Kay Huff.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I think that's how Ed met them.
Oh.
And I didn't know them. And then, you know, I got to know them.
Yeah.
But when Howard Neely contacted Ed and suggested that we buy cemetery plots because the Oddfellows were going to sell it to the city,
Right.
and they would jack up the price. So Ed came home and said, you know, that he wanted to buy 2 plots, you know, and I thought, well, and this was in August And he had his aortic aneurysm in October.
Yeah.
So, and so we walked up, we parked the car and then walked up and, we were talking about, well, where do you want to be? And so, and I said, well, Bev Stunkel is up here someplace. Did you know Bev Stunkel?
No.
Bev and Jerry Stunkel, they belong to our church.
Mm.
So we walked all the way around, and then I said, oh, there's Bev. And I said, this is a nice place. So,
Good view.
we stood and,
Yeah.
and he said, which side do you want to be on? I said, oh, the way we sleep, And so we stood out there. It was so peaceful.
Mm.
And then Charles Huff got the plots
right
next.
adjacent.
Oh.
Yeah.
It turned out that we had 3 plots. That
Oh.
We didn't. I didn't realize that, and I gave one to Sue Spiliotopoulos when Harry died because he wanted to be buried in the Pioneer Cemetery, and so.
That was lovely of you.
And then you knew about Scott.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were kind enough to have a double,
Okay.
So I was thankful for that.
Yeah.
And then Charles, I think they have 6
Yeah.
right next to us.
Yeah.
And Charles joke around again about, digging tunnels.
Between there.
That's totally him, right?
Yeah.
But
He
thank
had a great Irish sense of humor.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He did.
But thank you for bringing back so many memories in this
It's
conversation.
been fun. Yeah, it's been fun to go over all those great things that